Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness. Your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/set4life today. Secure your future before life makes the choice for you.
Not a good look for our profession.
How in the name of common sense did this ever get this far? Vaccines are not seek and destroy missions.
Because he was so severe.
This is nuts.
One of the top 20 things that she has discovered with her research company, Progenobiome, medicine has been corrupted. Where we go from here now, I don't know. Well, it doesn't work.
So angry. Punishable jail time.
Literally, this makes me believe we live in the Matrix. Like,
Deadliest year in U.S. history.
It wasn't a question of if, but when.
This first red.
if it doesn't work and it's safe, put it in a little Fauci Pez dispenser, give it to the patient, and shut the family up.
It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
He gave Fauci an award for being a hero of the pandemic.
This has been a problem.
These were lies.
Let's talk about the healthcare professionals supporting this.
In the meantime, what was going on behind the scenes?
Irony of the whole thing is,
Harvey's 100% correct.
This is freaking annoying.
ultimately we need to have hope for America.
What is going on here? What has poisoned your mind? Buckle up, kids. Welcome back to MDDC. I'm Dr. Tim Hindmarsh, host of the BS Free MD podcast. I am the MD side of this.
Well, what do they? You're what people call the real doctor.
Well, because I am,
and then I'm the. I don't know what that makes me. The pretend doctor.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay,
am I real? Touch me.
Yeah, it's kind of plastic.
Okay. So then I'm the chiropractor, and this whole thing has happened because, whether it's true or not, there seems to be this division, right? But there's real stuff in there. So I don't want to say it's BS, not to tease on your name of BS Free MD, but there are differences of opinion. There are different approaches, right? And we thought that would be valuable to beat it up a little bit, bat it around. And what do you think about it?
No, I think it's great. But I love the MDDC idea because we want to make sure that you're on the highway to health.
Not
other highway.
I don't know how good of a doctor you are, but maybe like a good marketer or a good.
I miss my calling. Advertising, creative lying. That's what I should have done.
Well, we thought we'd start off, with a mild topic, a non-controversial topic, vaccines.
What do you want to know?
What do you want to know?
Were you vaccinated as a kid?
Yeah.
Okay.
A typical. So I probably not many, right? There wasn't as many. Clearly, that would have been early 80s. I remember this story. I never thought about it, but I must have been my kindergarten shots because I was old enough to remember this, and I must have put them in my leg, and then my leg. Remember, my leg hurt. I couldn't walk. I had to put me on crutches. It wasn't the typical It wasn't the vaccine injury where you hear horrible stories. Right. But I remember enough of that. So I was vaccinated. I guess normally. Then the last time I got vaccinated was to go to college. And I had to get to not to Cairo, but to undergrad, and I must have had to get caught up, to go to. There was some, and we all went in this gymnasium, and it was like military or something. Just sat through the little line. I don't know what I honestly had to get, but I got whatever they gave me, and I went that night. I went out with some buddies, and we had a few beers, and I remember being not good. My body didn't react well, But I never thought about that. That's like hindsight. You know, I didn't wake up in the morning and go, oh, I think the jabs messed me up. I just remember like I had a few beers and I felt really rough for only having a couple of beers, kind of a scenario there. Now, just to finish that, my kids, 2 kids, they've never had any vaccines of any sort.
So does chiropractic school, because most chiropractors that I know or have interviewed, interacted with, would be in the quote anti-vax camp.
Yeah.
Do they teach that in chiropractic school, or is it just completely ignored?
No, they would. I would say where I went to was Northwestern up in Minnesota, and it's considered more of a medical leaning chiropractic school. That school actually taught you taught to get vaccinated.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually had debates with my professor, who happened to be a master's in public health professor from the University of Minnesota, who was our professor, would come over adjunct. And I debated him. I was raised my hands like, well, what about this? What about this? And he was a real arrogant guy. Anyway, but they were teaching like, we weren't going to be giving them, so we didn't have to learn it like that, right? But they would say, here they are, and here's what they did. Just kind of your typical medical, I guess, leaning maybe towards medical freedom of choice. But like the clinic there at the school was requiring vaccines and requiring, I think, even the COVID jabs and things like that. So
even like recently
offering flu shots on campus, things like that. So I think most of them. So I would say there's that now. But chiropractic's been, anti-vaccine. I should put that on the profession. Chiropractors have been speaking out against vaccines from the very beginning of our profession. We've been speaking out about fluoride. We spoke out about vaccines. So that's not new to some segment of our profession. And then there's ones that, certainly do. But you tend to find more of them in the holistic. Okay, so how about you? Or did you have another question to that?
No, I mean, I got whatever I had to get. In Canada, it was a little different. They did it through the school system.
Literally.
So public health and the school system were married.
You go get it at school?
At school.
Okay.
Which, if you actually believe that vaccines are one of the greatest, if not the greatest, healthcare endeavor you can participate in, then that's the way to do it. Like, honestly, like, why would you go to an expensive pediatric practice, make kids scared of the doctor because they're associating the doctor with the needle and all that. When you hate school anyway, so you might as well just job them there. But you have a
socialized medicine, or more socialized, so no cost.
Oh yeah, like if you missed early vaccines in kids in Canada, they sent a nurse to your house.
Straight up.
Yes.
And that wasn't.
I mean, that was like 20 when I was living there, which was what, 30, almost 35 years ago.
And they almost looked at us like doing a service. It wasn't even mean. It was like, oh, well, you missed. Sorry, we'll come to you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm totally comfortable, and I don't like the term, but I do not mind the pejorative of being called anti-vaccine. I'm okay with that. So my kids have never been vaccinated, doing fine. I think that there's better ways to deal with infectious diseases primarily than trying to do what vaccines claim that they do. And so I don't think that the approach, not the idea of a little bit of something to stimulate the nervous system approach. I think what we've done with the vaccine industry and is not delivering on its brand promise. And I think it's causing more harm than good.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with you now. I wouldn't have agreed with you 5 years ago.
Yeah. So COVID for you was the game changer in that.
Yeah, well, COVID, and then we started the Stopey podcast, right? And then we started interviewing people that we agreed and disagreed with. The first being in that world was Paul Thomas.
Yep.
Who, wrote a he was not even an anti-vax book. I mean, it was a vaccine questioning book, and the state of Oregon took his medical license away in 4 days. And I said to Paul, I've only, you're only the third person I've like met personally that's lost his license. The other two, one was essentially sexually assaulting nurses, and the second failed rehab for methamphetamine abuse twice.
And Paul was just giving them, he was not even giving vaccines. He was just freedom.
He was 100% freedom. So he had people in his practice that were 100% on the CDC vax. This is what I want. And then this was back when hippies didn't vaccinate, and now they're the first in line.
Right.
And this is Portland, 20 years ago or whatever. When I don't know, I mean, he was in practice for a long time, but and so he had people that were like zero, and he's just an observer. Like he had absolutely no, dog in the fight. And he's like, how come all these kids that aren't vaccinated, I never see them, like they're not sick.
Right.
So he did a retrospective analysis. He took billing codes and looked at it and said, okay, he had like 300 kids in each arm. So reasonably robust, at least to ask the question. And, 20% less autism, 30% less asthma, whatever the numbers were. And he was, and he's like, and plus they just didn't get sick.
Mm-hmm.
Like they didn't come in. Now, there's biases in there. There's confounders.
Sure.
People that aren't going to vaccinate are probably going to put up with the sniffles longer than somebody else, et cetera, et cetera.
But enough to be interesting.
Enough to get peer reviewed, to get published, and then of course get pulled because it went against the vaccine industry. So then he writes this book, which was, his license was still intact. He writes this book, I think it was the Vaccine Safety Plan or something like that. And he's like, well, maybe we should space out the shots. Maybe we shouldn't be giving them. And that was 4 days. 4 days. The guy that I used to work with that was, abusing staff took 3 years.
So that makes,
that made me scratch my head pretty hard.
Yeah. And that was kind of starting to wake you up a little bit to it, or just ask the questions? Or
like the COVID vac, I was completely off team COVID vax very early.
Yeah.
And the reason was my wife and I were both working together at that time. We were in a really busy urgent care, and about 2 to 3 months after the COVID vaccines were pretty much in widespread use, we saw all these side effects.
You were seeing them in front of your face?
In front of our face. People with their arms swollen for 5 months. My wife had a POTS syndrome. She had a myocarditis. And this is, these are in practices where we're seeing 25 to 30 patients a day. Okay. So busy, but not completely ridiculous. And, we'd go to our colleagues and be like, there's only been one parameter that's changed. And they're like, oh, well, it can't be that. Well, what do you mean it can't be that? It's like,
why not? Why can't it be that?
Why can't it be that? I mean, it could be anything.
Right.
And this is the parameter that changed. We should at least ask the question. And then, then I started getting censored for stuff, people we would interview on our podcast. And I'm like, okay, hang on here. I consider myself, and I still kind of do, because I think that there is some place for vaccination, actually. Mostly agnostic, because the data just isn't there. So I don't know. I can't. I don't
believe in mandated vaccines.
Yeah, I don't have enough data to be completely pro or completely con.
Okay.
And so that kind of puts me in this agnostic category, which means you need to ask questions to get answers. We can't even ask the question without getting censored. And I'm like, if you can't ask the question, even if the question is completely nuts, and that's what drove me completely crazy with regards to the COVID narrative stuff, is they would censor crazy people and they'd censor sensible people. And I'm like, no, if you really think Peter McCullough is crazy, turn the volume up on crazy and show how crazy it is. And then he just ceases to be a problem. When you censor people, then everyone logically goes, okay, well, they must be right, because why are they censoring him? Right. And I think that, I don't agree 100% with everything that Peter says, but I agree with most of it. Sure. I mean, we've both interviewed him, and, think he's a reputable guy.
When it comes to vaccine, where do you think are some reason, what in your world, what do you think is good ones? Or maybe that's the wrong way of good ones. What are ones you think that?
Well, in the North American vaccine schedule, I don't know, because believe it or not, when you actually go down the rabbit hole, it's some of the worst science that we've ever done. There's no good, the long-term follow-up doesn't really exist. Placebo control doesn't really exist. We base modern vaccine science on, years past, which I don't think is necessarily reasonable. I think what gives me pause, if you listen to if you've ever listened to any or read any of Peter Abay's stuff, Guinea-Bissau, where they went into it's the closest you're ever going to get to an actual laboratory for vaccine science. And they went into Guinea-Bissau, which was entirely unvaccinated, overcrowded, and very impoverished, malnourished, like all these bad things. And they showed really good evidence that the old school
attenuated
measles vaccine, essentially the live virus measles vaccine, not only prevented measles, it decreased all-cause mortality. So these kids that got that vaccine not only didn't die of measles, they didn't die of other infectious things later on in their life.
In tough.
Exactly. In Guinea-Bissau, not in Orlando. So, but it tells you two stories. It tells two tales. And the first tale is vaccines can do good things, because we can show that.
They can affect a chosen metric.
Yes. But that metric, when you do, like, there's hardly anything in medicine where you can really show good, tight, all-cause mortality data that is beneficial.
Right.
And that was. So I'm pro-vax on that one. The other thing it showed, which was really, really fascinating, that no one wants to talk about, is vaccines do things other than prevent the disease that they're injected for.
In a good way?
We don't know, because we haven't studied it way.
Yeah.
Some good, some not good. They're also the people that got the original DPT vaccine pulled because it killed little girls at a higher rate than little boys. So these guys are, again, they're from Denmark. No dog in the fight kind of thing. And they believe in vaccines, but they believe in appropriate vaccines for, appropriate situations.
Do you think, okay, so here's my response to some of that, which is, in this where I get frustrated. When we're only asking, it seems to me that when we're only looking for vaccine solutions, like happened with COVID, right? Or like with the doctored book we were talking about a little bit earlier on the last episode about, if we're only trying to find drugs to, address amyloid plaques that we're not even sure if that's the cause, and we're spending, hundreds of millions of dollars to find that. This is where I get frustrated on the holistic side. It's like, it feels like the only option seems to be, should I get vaxxed or not? COVID is a great example of that, right? Where the only option is, the propaganda is trying to say it's get vaxxed or die, right? Or if the measles, it's not even a measles outbreak. The cases of, the whatever you want to call what's going on right now, a few hundred cases I think we're at. Is that in U.S. right now for measles? Something like that.
Yeah, I think it's around 200.
Typical-ish in a year, every few years, it seems like, I guess that happens. And so my point being, but then everybody's talking about it again, and it's again virtue signaled as if you're not going to get vaccinated for the measles, you're a bad person, you're going to spread it. I think there's so many misses in the vaccine conversation based on assumptions that the science doesn't really support. Maybe that study you're talking about in that one instance, right? But not in our childhood vaccine schedule.
But that vaccine isn't even available anymore
in the U.S. or anywhere.
I don't think it's available anywhere anymore. And the reason is it's essentially a live virus vaccine, so it causes measles related, just like the oral polio vaccine, especially according to Peter Abbe and his wife, is one of the three that they look at affecting all-cause mortality, which is the old school measles vaccine, the oral polio, which is a live virus vaccine, and BCG, which is a tuberculosis vaccine, which basically has nothing to do with tuberculosis when they studied it. It has everything to do with it bolsters your immune system in some ways. They actually studied it in COVID, believe it or not, of giving the BCG vaccine because it seems to have this positive immune effect. And what Peter says, to borrow his words, which I think are just brilliant, he said, in Western medicine, we're on a seek and destroy mission. It's like, take a vaccine, don't get measles, take a vaccine, don't get rubella, whatever the case may be. He goes, instead, what we should be asking is, how do we get the most robust and healthiest immune system?
So, amen, right? So if that's the statement, I would say, for me, my Ben Rawl personal approach is live in the world, be exposed to things, the billions of germs around, and I'm comfortable with that risk.
Yeah, I think that's a rational risk to take. Where it gets challenging is, again, you're dealing with pediatrics, and there's some stuff that's truly, like, I look back at it now and I'm kind of stunned with this country as I am, that I never kind of I question chickenpox right off the bat. I'm like, why in the hell are we, because that vaccine,
that one came into being as
I emerged, as I was,
you didn't have it as a kid, you had chickenpox naturally,
correct?
Yeah.
As I, emerged from the womb of medical training and, was a baby doctor, I'm like, why are we vaccinating for this? And literally It was a faith exercise. Oh, because 75 years from now, these kids won't get shingles. And I'm like, what?
But we don't know.
We're not going to know,
Yeah.
but we're doing it. I mean, that was just kind of crazy. The one that's even crazier, though, is a hepatitis B vaccine on a 1-day infant when you know the hepatitis status of the mother. If you don't know the hepatitis status of the mother, she's had no care, blah, blah, blah. There's, that's
Have a
rational.
conversation.
But like my wife, who...
She's not here to defend herself.
No, but I mean, I don't think she was sleeping around, and I know she wasn't doing IV drugs, and, she got a test to show that she didn't have hepatitis before, when she was pregnant. So again, like, why are you giving a 1-day-old?
And I think this is where, and our friend like Dell has talked about, a lot of people talked about it, which is like, and then what happened with COVID, that just erodes. So I have a philosophical problem with it, just in the approach to that. I'd just rather deal, my immune system that God gave me, I'm okay building that and naturally, and I don't feel like the risk of, because even if you wanted to say, and we use the base studies as an example, even if you wanted to show, if you told me tomorrow, and I don't know, I'll ask you too, if you said, hey, there's this new vaccine, they actually studied it against a placebo, against this, and it helped with all-cause mortality, and I'd still just say, I'm good. Even if the science was real. I'm just not interested. That's just not my approach to health. So just because something might show something, I still am like, well, that's fine for that person. I'm just okay now.
So you wouldn't take a yellow fever vaccine if you're going on a mission trip to a yellow fever endemic area?
No. But I'm pretty hardcore like that. Like, and this is where I stand. I say, and I think that, well, a couple things. You might like me, but I don't think you care about me that much, right? Like, if I die, I die.
Right. Well, yeah, but it's your choice.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You're okay with me having that choice.
Yeah, I'm okay with you having that choice, and I'm also okay with
Me
potentially
dying.
debating and thinking it's dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from action sports, right? I've watched lots of people. I witnessed 2 recreational fatalities by the time I was 45 years old.
Live.
Yeah. And, people make really dumb decisions sometimes that kill them. Should you still be able to do that? I think so. That said, it's pretty freaking devastating when somebody makes a dumb decision and dies.
Yeah.
So, that said, I wrote a Substack on this. I thought diets were the cultiest thing in healthcare. People don't say I eat a carnivore diet. They say I am carnivore, right?
Yeah.
And until this whole vaccine debate started boiling over with COVID and then into the childhood vaccine schedule, and I'm like, vaccines are way cultier than diets. Because like the irrational freak attacks that people on my allopathic side of the fence have,
Right.
it's just 8 cases in Fort Lauderdale of measles, and I'm getting texts from my colleagues, I hate Florida. And I'm like, okay, go to Oregon, see how you like that. And it's just irrational. It's completely irrational.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you, this is the one that gets me. If you went into a doctor's lounge, or you had a, doctor's conference, physician conference, and you said, we're going to spend an hour talking about the appropriate use of antibiotics, and how we should use less antibiotics, and how veterinary medicine needs to get their heads in the game and stop prescribing to the entire herd, and don't give antibiotics for a cold, and blah, blah, blah. You will be lauded as a hero. Okay? If you had that same conversation and saying, you know what? I think we need to question vaccines and ask whether we're doing the right thing, the right way, with the right schedule, you will be like Joan of Arc burned at the stake.
Right now, currently.
Yes. And I'm like,
even looking at what some of the things the questions Bobby's asking.
It's just the questions. And that's that's the thing. Like, you interviewed Sabine Hazen, and I consider her a friend of ours. And, she's seen, you take antibiotics, it affects your microbiome. But you take vaccines, it affects your microbiome. So vaccines are doing things that emerging science is showing us aren't necessarily good. Well, that means you should be questioning them.
Yeah. And it's appropriate to question.
But yet it's somehow you're all in or you're all out.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. So I would say, and I agree. And so you may use that yellow fever one as an example, like you might look at that and say that's dumb. And I would look at that and say, I don't think we've been able to ask the right questions. And so I'm still not impressed enough or trusted enough. Right. And that maybe in that world could be seen as like a religion or a cult. And also, I just don't think that, I think that the time and money and energy, just like we did with the COVID jab, one of the things that probably endeared me to you the most, this isn't very debate, we aren't being mean to each other yet, but is when you said the whole COVID, and you can correct this if you want to say this differently, but you said, if you look at the whole response that we did in America with COVID, we would have been better off doing nothing. It would have been worse. Okay. If the lockdowns, all the stuff that we did, right? The way that we did that, if we would have just gone along as business as usual, people would have died and all that kind of stuff, right? But it wouldn't have been worse. All right. And you can caveat that if you want to. But I look at that and I think, I agree with you. I think it's actually a brilliant statement that necessitates a lot of questions to, holy smokes, how is that possible that we invested trillions of dollars into that, doing all the stuff that we did, and we would have been equally-ish as good if we would have done nothing? I think that is I don't know how a little country doctor like you could come up with such a smart question, because that teases out a lot of stuff, Doc.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opinion, because we don't have another world in another parallel universe that,
Fair.
I don't write for Marvel.
Right.
Oh, we're lazy. We're just going to make another. Okay, sorry, that's a digression. But it's like, it's hard to believe that that's not the case, though. That if you would have just done nothing, okay, what would have happened? Well, I mean, you would have still had some people with comorbidities and whatever that would have passed away. You would have got hurt. You would have got natural herd immunity rapidly.
Yeah. Because
as that virus is very tiny, mutates quickly, it's going to run through the system rapidly. And
not the economic implications, not the social challenges of the
deaths of despair.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, that's my opinion. You can refute it. Fauci can get all upset about it. I don't really care.
So I look at that and I think, I just think, man, there's other approaches that we can take that are more holistic minded. I don't just mean in the crunchy holistic. I mean taking into account all of the different variables and saying it's not the stupidest thing to think about, because we're sitting in that place, and there's been some good research coming out about measles now again, American measles, if you will, right? That we're in that, we've lost enough generations of vaccinated people, meaning only vaccinated people, that we've lost that immunity that pre-whatever, 1955 or whatever they say, and I don't think that that's all good news.
No, I think, when one of my friends wrote a Substack about that, and it's like, I think it's very foolish to think that, 2025 measles is 1955 measles. I don't think it is. And I don't know that it's because measles mutates, because measles is a pretty gigantic virus as viruses go. So, you flip a couple base pairs, it's not going to make much difference in what it does. But because we have this completely different immune pressure, because we've essentially made people dependent on the vaccines.
Yeah.
And so you don't have, mothers with robust breast milk that has natural immunity in it, which is different than vaccine immunity. I mean, vaccine immunity is different than natural immunity. Yeah. There's no question about that. We completely forgot that during COVID. It just went out the window. And so, again, like, even members of my family, if they listen to this, are going to be like, he's lost his mind.
Yeah.
He's moved to Florida and is inhaling swamp gas. But I think you got to be able to question everything. I think you got to be able to question frickin' germ theory.
Yeah.
I think we've reached the end of germ theory being this. I mean, germ theory's probably been the single medical postulate that saved the most lives and improved the lives of humanity more than anything. I don't think that there's a question of that I absolutely believe. But it also doesn't mean that it can go too far until it's like going to Vegas. It's super fun till it's not. Which is usually 2.5 days. Or we're in Orlando. It's like going to Disney.
Yeah.
For me, that's about an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's driving through. I'm angry before I get there. Okay, so I think this is what happens, Doc, right? We get in these, I don't even know if the word is extremes, because I don't think that has to be how it's said. But we get to these, we all understand. I think we all, now I shouldn't say we all, there's some fringe stuff out there, which I'm okay to read and think about sometimes, right? There's other factors that can affect our resiliency, right? They can, the viruses, are there not viruses, and EMF, like, okay, I like to talk about it, right? But I think through, we can understand that I can get sick, and then, that can have an impact on you, right?
Right.
So if that's being said, however, to your point, I think you mentioned this earlier, we've then, that belief in the germ theory to this, we got to get rid of all the germs, and all germs are bad, and they're the enemy, and we need to make things to treat them or against them, or to get rid of them, or to clean them, or to take if we think we got them. That has ran its course and created enough of other problems, and even in just the way we think about our health, that it's now we've lost some of the gains. We've lost, it's created just a medical approach that war metaphor all the time, which is beat these bad guys, and it's changed how we look at health.
Well, think of it this way. If you're depressed, you get an antidepressant.
They call it that.
If you have an infection, you get an antibiotic. If you're anxious, you get an anxiolytic or an anti-anxiety medicine. So there is sort of this military footing from a philosophical perspective that allopathic medicine sits on. Whereas,
and they believe that word means it does that.
Correct, absolutely. Well, no, and then you get the ultimate corruption where you add the financial, the corporate, the marketing arm to that, and now it's
like Roger does such a good job, McFillin, on understanding the mental health world of that, right?
Yes.
Just what they call antidepressant doesn't mean it's an antidepressant,
right? But just the whole concept that everything is anti something, right? Like it's what we talked about, Peter Abbe. It's the seek and destroy mission, right? Everything is it appears in Western medicine as a seek and destroy mission, rather than it's an enhance and get out of the way. Give your body what it needs and then let it do its thing. And we need way more of that. Like there's a time for chest tubes and intubation and all of the good ER stuff and all of that. But when you think of the quote of only 3.5% of health is contributed by healthcare.
Yeah.
And we spend 20% of the national, output on healthcare. That to me says you're getting ripped off.
Yeah. Okay, here's one. Let's do this. We'll do these questions. One is, what do we think each one of us thinks maybe the most ridiculous thing in our camp that, making fun of ourselves, and then maybe we'll maybe say, what do we think the most ridiculous thing of each other's are? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You gonna go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, of your own?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the concept behind preventive medicine is insane.
For allopathy?
Yeah.
Or the whole concept in general?
No, I think that prevention is great.
Okay.
But I think that using this unbelievably high, like unbelievably expensive, amazingly highly trained people as physicians as prevention tools is just silly. It's like using a $500 electric impact wrench as a hammer when you need a hammer. Right. I mean, most of prevention is, virtually all of prevention is a roofing hammer. You're framing a house. You get up at a certain time, you have good relationships, all the stuff we've talked about. That said, as much as I think that's my biggest pet peeve, I'm alive today because of preventive medicine. I have a family history of colon cancer. I had precancerous polyps. I have kept up on that. And clearly by the age I am now, when I would have colon cancer, and I'd probably have metastatic colon cancer and be dead. So it's not that...
Without colonoscopy.
But if you look at a lot of the other preventive stuff we do, or this idea that you take a medicine to prevent something, all of the hypertension industry is not, gee whiz, why do you have hypertension in the first place? It's you have hypertension, take it so you don't have a heart attack. So again, I'm not saying don't take your antihypertensive medications by any means. I am questioning why we don't ask the other questions though. One, is there another way to do this? Is there a way that's better? Is there a way that enhances my total health rather than makes me broke, makes me like we're broken enough as a society. I don't need to, this whole idea of going to the doctor is just like, I'm broken, fix me. Yeah. And part of that has always bugged me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about you? What do you think is the biggest irritation in the holistic world, let's say?
Yeah. Well, and this will probably be controversial. I'll make some enemies on this one. I've said something like this before, holistic healthcare, I'll use chiropractic, that's my degree. Chiropractic's not good because allopathic sucks. Okay? That's not a good way to build your,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're terrible and doesn't work, come to me. I don't think that's a good argument. Okay? I do that, but I mean, like, I don't think that could be the totality. So what I'm frustrated with in my profession right now is this really bougie, high-end, you kind of alluded to it, ironically, in your one. So you're seeing these clinics come up where get a $25,000 body scan. We're going to look at every cell, you know what I mean, right? And we're going to give you 8 million vitamins, and you do this every 6 months. I really get frustrated because it tells this story to people. The average person, just, 99% of people out there that can't afford that, can't do that, that are just living, that if they don't have access to that, almost the same, ironically, the same statement, which is you're broken. If you can't get enough holistic healthcare and you have your whole team of, super gurus around you, then you're, I guess, screwed. Right. And if you can't, you got to, you're going to come to see me. Well, you better bring your, your 10 grand or your whatever and this and that. And I look at that and I go, man, that stops people. So it's created this in many ways. Dr. Bruce Lipton used to say this, right? He said, medicine's going to become more like holistic healthcare. Chiropractic world or, holistic is going to become more medicalized because we think we need more, right? Take this, because that validates our necessity, right? You've got low D, take D. You've got high this, take this for this, take this for this. And we've become medically minded, holistic practitioners. And since we're outside of the system, we get into this niche, bougie, I'm going to reverse your disease, pay me because I'm so smart about holistic healthcare. And I feel like that has been detrimental. What do you think about that?
No, I agree. And it gets me to my biggest pet peeve about it.
Oh, okay. Mine?
About chiropractors, which is...
Chiropractors or holistic or chiropractic?
No, I know chiropractors. This one I'm going to go...
This is just for me?
But yeah, which is, it really bugged me the beginning. I won't mention names.
Yeah.
But at the middle of COVID, and you get these guys that are super outspoken, and I'm doctor this, I'm doctor that, and I'm like, you're a doctor of what?
Okay.
And you never hear that. It's sort of like they hide behind the fact that they have a doctor in chiropractic, which is perfectly acceptable.
Right.
But then so there's sort of a little bit of a kind of a deception by not really saying it. And then they're telling you what medicine supplements and blah, blah, blah that you should take. And I'm like, dude, you don't have a license to prescribe medication.
For COVID.
Yeah, for anything.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like, don't tell me. Like I prescribed hundreds of thousands of medications, and lots of them I would never prescribe again. But at least I was at the end of the stick. I was at the tip of the spear. My license, my livelihood, my legal obligations to my patients are there when I write that prescription. So it's super easy for some guy that's never written a prescription to like tell my patients what they should and shouldn't take.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, no, I don't buy that one. That one's like, stay in your lane, Stay
in your lane. That's your biggest pet peeve?
That was my, yeah.
It's kind of... So I just want you to, can you just flesh this out a little bit more? I genuinely mean this. So and you're talking even nutraceuticals, you weren't even talking prescriptions, or were you talking specifically?
Mostly prescriptions, like don't take this prescription,
some drug.
Yeah. But then it usually ends with the guy having a whole bunch of supplements with their name on it that they're selling, right? Yeah. Which is exactly what you're...
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I agree.
What do you not like about? Well, there's
lots. We probably agree. Well, what's the biggest pet peeve?
I think the biggest pet peeve is, and you're right, there's probably a lot. And this is so I want to almost pick a specific one so this doesn't sound as almost like, when you're in an interview and they say, tell me your worst attribute.
I just care too much.
I just care too much. I work too hard. I think, but to go generic, it's what it's done to the medicalization of people. How you guys, right, have made people think about their health, scared us out of our own bodies, direct to consumer, like you were talking about earlier. So I would probably say that the profession, you guys have allowed, I'll say it like this, you've allowed yourselves to become, pill pushers.
Mm-hmm.
And you got your schools infiltrated by pharma. I don't know, however it all works, right? Your science, your journals, and yet you hold yourselves out as the be all end all of all health. Not you, right? The profession.
No,
you're stupid if you remember that. Have you ever heard of the Eisenberg study? You ever heard of that one? It's he was, I believe it was Harvard, and the story was that he was sitting in Harvard and he's looking out of his window and there's like an acupuncture clinic out there. And he's like, I don't understand why people would go, and he said, and watching people go in and out of this place all day long, using their own money, cash. Why? It's Harvard. They could come over here, yet they're over there. So he's like, they must be stupid. That's what he figured, okay? So he did a study and he found out they actually were higher educated than the typical other patient, right? These were not idiots. These were college graduates, whatever it was. And he's like, how many people go and how much money do they spend? And he actually found that there's a lot of really smart people that are choosing to spend their own money in, alternative healthcare. And so I think what is frustrating is and it's probably just part of it's our own issue. Like we're held up as we're these idiots. You have it all figured out, even though, gosh, it's a hard pill to swallow, pun intended.
Yeah, well, I can't disagree with that, especially when I see those idiotic Jardiance ads and they're normalizing obesity.
Mm.
Like where my demented brain goes is,
didn't you say this, Doc? Didn't interrupt. Didn't you tell me this during COVID? Like, I thought it was you. Maybe it was Dr. Makis who said he was so disappointed on how his profession just rolled over. Like with the jabs and stuff. Like nobody was like, he's like, you guys could have stopped it if you would have just said as a profession, right?
Yeah, but there's reasons for that. And it's kind of this moral hazard, right? And like if you look at how many people in medicine are my age and are just fleeing,
okay,
because they're like, okay, I'm done with this BS. I don't want to deal with it
anymore.
Doctors
in practice.
Yeah. And they're not done with the philosophical BS, like the discussion we're having. They're just done with paperwork and all the bureaucratic nonsense. And you get to a point where you kind of, are financially independent and you're like, okay, well, I could make a bit, it's just not satisfying anymore. So I'm going to do something else. But then you think, okay, well, who are we graduating? And you have all these people that are, 35 to 45 years old. The average medical debt, I think, is $300,000. Okay. And you have no other skills. Like you've taken your entire young adulthood and you have focused it on this super narrow.
And you're not justifying, you're just explaining why.
I'm explaining why. So you have, this very focused training. You have a business degree, you can go work for Pepsi or you can go work for Apple. You have a medical degree, you can, and then, you add a specialty to that. So now you're 10 plus years after high school, you're $300,000 in debt. You depending on your specialty,
one job you can do.
You have a job. Yeah. You have one job that you can do. And you got to, a lot of specialties will pay you $500,000 a year. What are you going to do? Like how many people are going to go, yeah, I finally realized this is BS. I'm just going to, go to work at Starbucks and never pay my loans off. I mean, I get it. And so, and you see it again back to vaccines. Like if I question vaccines, why is there such a almost violent response? What? Why? I didn't kidnap your kid. Like we should be able to have a dialogue about anything.
So why do you think that is?
Because it threatens the entire paradigm. That's what I think. It's not that it just threatens vaccines. It threatens the entire medical paradigm. If vaccines have been held to the highest level of the canonization of medical scripture, that if that's wrong, what else is wrong? And I think that's the terrifying part
for them.
Yeah, because we had pediatricians. I've heard this from tons of pediatricians. If you question my judgment about vaccines, the most studied and most robust data in the history of mankind, then why would you ever take my advice about something we don't know about, like pediatric cancer? And I'm like, well, you've never looked into the vaccine. I used to say that until I actually read about the vaccine studies and how stuff doesn't exist that we thought existed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, so I think that's what it threatens everything. It's like leaving, it's like leaving your faith. That's a painful experience for people.
Coupled with, actually, in this instance, pretty much your livelihood and a good livelihood. So it's even got that initial pressure just leaving the faith, coupled with actually your livelihood and your 10 years of your life that you've spent, on that. So as we kind of maybe kind of wind this down, or we'll pretend like we're going to wind it down.
America spends more on healthcare than any other country, yet we rank 48th in life expectancy. We spend trillions, but 200,000 insured people still declare medical bankruptcy every year. Clearly, the system is broken. But what if there was a way to take back control, to break free from inflated costs and red tape? That's exactly why Crowd Health was created, a smarter, more transparent way to pay for healthcare. No middleman, no bureaucracy. Just a community of people helping each other when it matters most. Join the revolution. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use promo code BSFREE for a discount on your first 3 months. Because your health should be in your hands, not theirs.
You said something either this episode or last, something. Here's how I remember it. A lot of it is just not doing nothing. I don't have a problem with that term. I practice that way. I live that way. Letting nature run its course maybe is a way of saying it, right? That's time. I remember one of my professors, he said one time, he was giving us this clinical, he's like, Pearl, he's like, okay, we're sitting there like, okay, what is it? I don't know what out. He's like, some people, they just need a tincture of time. I was like, buzzkill. We were waiting for the super duper, formula. And I think that sometimes well-intentioned, sometimes not, we have tried to shrink that window of the cold's going to get better, the fever's going to go away, the cut's going to, I don't know, right? Majority, pick a number, right? And then those ones that are outside of that, Doc, even then could be amenable by lifestyle, right? So, all the stuff that you talk about, I talk about, on a daily basis. And actually, it's at the tips of your fingertips in today's internet, right? Now, some's BS, but you don't have to come to me to get good nutritional advice. There's a lot of good nutritional advice, right? You don't have to come to me to learn how to exercise. You can, right? There's a lot of good stuff out there. So a lot of healthcare, I don't know what the number is that we should be spending on healthcare. There was this old book, you might have read it, by Paul Zane Pilsner. It was called The Next Trillion. And his argument was, we're not going to get rid of traditional medicine. There's just going to be a wellness industry that will come up beside it, right? And that's what he was calling the next trillion. And I'm like, man, I think both industries could actually go for less. You know what I mean? I mean, Roger McFillin always talks about we need less psychiatrists. We don't need as many because we've artificially inflated the need for these people to be giving these pills out. Right. No, you produce customers with marketing. And so I think that we could have less healthcare in general, but both of our professions, and I'm not knocking the existence of doctors. I just mean, because at the end of the day, really, it's most of it is self-care. Holistically, and even on much of what's considered medical right now, outside of trauma. You agree with that?
No, I entirely agree with that. And I think absolutely most of it is self-care. But, let's be honest.
Okay.
Self-care is hard. It's hard to get up in the morning and, exercise until you make it a habit, which, is 6 weeks. And it's difficult to, change your diet. And it's, and then, you have this satanic temptation on the other side where it's just a pill. There's an app for that. There's always some commercial. I mean, this goes back to the heart of, what makes the U.S. economy. I mean, we're consumer driven economy. So why wouldn't you consume more healthcare? We consume more of everything. So of course we're going to consume more healthcare. And where's
with the
that
belief, with this kind of unquestioned belief, never actually even a reflection. Did it work? Did we get healthier? Like Bobby, they're fired up because he just laid off 10 or 20,000 people or something.
It's a good start.
And they said, everybody's freaking out, or those, certain group of people are freaking out. And he's like, listen, and I'm paraphrasing. I mean, you've had your shot. We spend more than ever. We've only gotten sicker in this last, period of time. We're going to need to try something different here.
Well, no, but I've said this, I don't know how many times on the podcast. If you actually believed pharma advertising, we should all have 6-pack abs, sleep like babies, be super happy, and, take our Xiaflex and have ramrod straight penises, right? I mean, but we're not. We're fatter, sicker, and dumber than we've ever been. We're
right.
less
happy. Something's wrong. Something's amiss. Somebody's lying.
Right. That's, just the inability to have the big picture. And it goes to everything. I mean, it goes maybe to the heart of man, right? It's like, you get a new car and it's super fun. And then it's like, well, I need another hit of dopamine to get another. And it's just like, whoa. If you actually look at that, it's like, okay, am I really changing my life for the better? Am I really getting healthier? Am I really? And I think a lot of people just get so spun up, so distracted. I think the greatest power of the devil is not necessarily temptation, it's distraction. And then we don't sit down, we don't sit in those quiet moments and just ask, okay, where am I going? What do I believe in? About anything. It's just consume like locusts. And you corporatize healthcare, you advertise, you market it, you're going to get exactly what we have. So it's culture that has to shift, and I think it will. I think Bobby is a cultural phenomenon, honestly, and I can't
in the sense of the true definition of that.
Yes,
it's a zeitgeist film. It's a shift. It's a watershed moment of
right. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It does not matter if he gets everything he wants done, because he won't. And it doesn't matter if Trump gets everything he wants done. It won't. It's a cultural shift. There has been a cultural shift in healthcare. There's no question about that. And COVID did it. We should be on our knees thanking God for the benefits of COVID. I mean, I not to make light of the people that we lost and the terrible crap that government did to us. But I mean, that was a big wake up call.
There's a couple of things come to mind. One is I always love the quote, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I think that's partly where we're sitting. I mean, we can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. Like people talk about Maha, is it going to fall apart, this, that, and this things that happen when anything's happening. And I think my answer has been, I don't think you can stop it even if you wanted to. It's just too many people are asking too many questions now. There'll be some messes, there'll be some disasters. One of the things that I've appreciated seeing, like you just brought up with people that have passed away as one example, and I've seen and we talked about this, some of the people that talk a lot about food and stuff like that out there, right? But there's occasionally they'll say things that I generally really agree with, which is like, why are we if we're worried about 200 cases of measles, okay, how are we not worried about 60% of our kids obese? Like, how is that not made
right
at least certainly equal time? Why are we not talking on every show about the chronic childhood diseases? Why is not every pediatrician, medical or otherwise, beating their chests for being concerned about that, right? When all they're worried about is, trying to tell everybody to get their measles vaccine. It doesn't seem to make sense to me, And I think you're seeing a lot of other people that are saying that doesn't make sense to me either. I don't care if you're a doctor or a mom or a lawyer, right? You're just going, this isn't jiving with reality.
Would you go to a fat personal trainer? Not like I'm in perfect shape, but should you see a fat doctor? Should you see a morbidly obese? I mean, nothing
is this
says
where you get yourself in trouble.
Totally. Nothing says what I do doesn't work like a 300-pound physician.
I had a friend one time. They had their baby, and they had the baby in the hospital. They were choosing not to vaccinate, and the doctor came in and he was really upset at them, and he was a big guy or whatever. And my friend he just kind of looked at him and he goes, I think you and I have very different definitions of healthcare. But that's kind of the case. And I guess as we close down this first episode and give us feedback, things you want us to talk about. We want to, we want to do this because we think there's meat here. There's things that people are asking. We're trying to find out, what does it look like? What is it? How do I navigate this? On both sides, maybe you're given the okay for people to ask questions that are maybe more allopathically aligned. People are, that have been scared of chiropractors or holistic, and they think that's all just snake oil salesmen. We can look at that and go, well, I never thought about that, or hey, and then everything in between. Not that we have all the answers, but send us feedback on topics or ideas or things you want or something like that. Where do you see this going?
No, that's exactly where I hope it goes, because it's the dialogue, and we agree on most things, but we don't agree on everything. And I think that's perfectly. I mean, that's life. That's what makes life rich too. But we need a lot more humility in
both sides.
And the powers that on both sides, really. Like it's just. And again, just get away from this kind of tribal warfare stuff, because nobody has all knowledge. Nobody has. I mean, we have lots of people in the holistic world that think they do. We have lots of, I love what Sean Baker says about longevity medicine. He goes, when you have somebody that's 150 and knows the answer, I'll listen to him. Otherwise, you guys can just, you're just selling stuff. And I have no problem with selling stuff, but I have a real problem with dishonesty.
Well, is this like you said, what did you say earlier? You're talking like, was it, you said, it's preventing shingles when you're 75. Well, I'm not going to be able to prove that until everybody's gone, and then you say, sorry, it didn't actually, right?
Right.
So if I'm going to sell longevity, and I guess you didn't die, well, bad luck, sorry about that, right?
Yeah, it's just and don't be scared to ask questions of anybody, and you'll learn a lot about who you can trust if you ask questions. Again, with humility, don't not gotchas, not whatever. But just, hey, how does this work? I don't understand. And if you see frustration and whatever, then that they don't understand either.
Yeah. Well, I know we were joking, about, I don't even know if you'd call this a debate. I mean, even with the best of intentions, two guys that aren't afraid to have a debate, even when we just sit down and talk, it's like it doesn't have to even get that contentious, because we're just talking about it. Right?
Right.
And even though we both are, guys that are not afraid of that, it's like I can't even really muster it up, because we're trying to find answers, knowing we don't have all the answers, knowing we're not going to probably get all the answers. And if that lets people like you watching and going, well, if these two, for whatever it's worth, these two guys can hopefully be humble enough. And I guess my kind of closing words is, you said, don't be afraid to ask questions. And I would say also, just don't be afraid in general of health and healing. Like, you don't have to feel like just because you can't have access to the guru and you don't have $10 million and you don't have the greatest XYZ, you still have pretty amazing God-given health that's doing a pretty darn good job most of the time, right? And there's a lot of things in your own bucket, in your own list that you can do on your own. And so this isn't about trying to help you get the super answer and I'm going to get this vaccine and not this one and I know this and I need that. No, maybe. So some of you, that's going to be the navigation. But a lot of this is just trying to get you to, maybe see a different perspective on healthcare from people that are pretty committed to their professions or committed to their patients at least, right? Mm-hmm. And willing to stick their necks out there. But it's been fun.
We got to do this again.
Yeah.
This is good times.
This is a nice studio.
This is a very nice studio. But I feel like when I look back there and it's like 2001: A Space Odyssey or something.
I feel like I'm gonna get sucked in.
I'm like Stanley Kubrick all out,
I feel,
which no one will understand that reference, but that's okay.
So are you hopeful that Maha's gonna be all right?
Well, I think Maha's already all right.
Yeah,
because sometimes it's not the exact thing that that movement's going to do. It's the fact that it exists at all. And I think the fact that it exists all signals a cultural shift. And the fact, like we said in the last episode, of this, liquor dispenser or that I talked to, and he's like, dude, we're getting killed with young kids. And it's like, they're the ones that should be drunk, right? And they're not drinking, which that is a super positive health shift, that you're seeing a big change in 25-year-olds.
Yeah. The other thing is, and we talked, we had a guest, and then I think you have her too, it's just, don't lose perspective. I've been saying this a lot lately. I don't know why, but like, in the meantime, just get on living. You're good at this. What's your guys' foundations at BS Free? Fun, but what's your...
Oh, the 4 Fs?
Yeah.
Faith, family, finances, and fun.
Right.
And you have to have all 4, but they also have to be in the correct order, and they have to be balanced. I always tried to hit the fun part sometimes too much, and then the rest suffers, right?
But because that makes no mistake, we're all going to die. Right. And so this isn't about finding, you might be watching this, I'm going to listen to Doc and he's going to have all these secret, good insights for me on health. Like, listen, at the end of the day, I joke around. It's like, Lazarus raised from the dead, but he died again. All right. Like, he eventually died. Like, so this thing does end. And it's really more about, I'd honestly rather spend more time talking to people about how they're going to live and what they're going after and their families and things like that. Enjoying every minute. We've all lost friends and people we care about and people too young and things like that. That don't miss that in the midst of this. Don't spend so much time trying to not stay healthy. Just go live your life. Like, somebody was talking today about their grandparents, like, think she lived to be 103. She goes, and they never talked about their health. Like, they just...
Right. I went to Daytona Bike Week a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And I'm walking down Main Street in Daytona where they have the, all the bikes and the bars and the whatever. And you see these like morbidly obese guys smoking a cigarette with a beer in their hand. And I looked at my wife and I said, this is like an anti-longevity conference. It's like, I'm going to smoke, drink, be fat, and ride a motorcycle without a helmet. And I'm like, part of it I really respect it. I'm like, at least it's honest.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't really give a crap, but this is...
And probably enjoying the heck out of it.
Yeah,
like they're in.
Are they having more fun than Brian Johnson spending $2 million so he doesn't die? Like... there's some kind of balance, right? Like you can healthcare yourself to the grave too. And there's gotta be some balance. I remember McFillin had a guest and she was talking about drinking and she's like, he's like, it's poison and there's no safe amount of alcohol. And I'm like, well, who wants to live a safe life? Not me.
Then don't drive, don't walk, don't take a bath.
Every single thing that makes me feel alive is going to kill me.
Yeah.
Action sports and, there's a point where there has to be some balance.
Yeah. Amen. Well, this is fun, man.
Right.
I think we need to keep talking about it. MDDC, we got to work on our theme song for this, right?
Well, Brian Johnson lives in Sarasota. Maybe I can get him to give us the rights to Highway to Hell. And we'll change it to Highway to Health. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
Can't imagine what that would cost, but
it's in the budget.
Can always ask.
Yeah. If we take Pharma sponsorships, we can get it.
That's exactly right.
But, all right, brother. I've enjoyed it.
Likewise.
Yeah.